Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Dino. It's a beautiful day here in Niagara Falls. It's Saturday, the sun's out, I'm able to get the grass cut, and I'm able to enjoy the new pergola that my wife and I have built. And I hope you like it. Feels good. We got some new furniture. I like it. Now, I haven't really been uploading a lot of videos lately, mostly because I've been working on the deck here. And Saturdays and Sundays are pretty much the only days I have off now. So the content is not flowing nearly as well as it was at the beginning of this channel. But I do like to upload some stuff. And one of the things that I really do enjoy about this channel is the comments. I always ask you to leave comments. And the real treasure in those comments are some of the tips that I get from you, the viewers. So today I thought it would be kind of interesting to take a look at maybe 5 interesting, useful tips that you've provided to me that I've sort of either already used, but I think is worth sharing, or just sort of changed the way I think about things. So I'm going to get back down there into the shed. We'll go through them, maybe start with some of the more obvious ones that I've used in the past, but other people have commented on, and share those tips with you. So let's get into the shed. All right, well, we're back in the shed here where it's nice and comfy. There's a reason I'm in the shed too, and that's because it is a Saturday today, which means in the summer, all kinds of activity is going on around my neighborhood. There's a person just down the street here using a rotary hammer drill either to break up some concrete or maybe mount some railings to their porch. I'm not sure, but it's a little bit loud out there. So inside the shed where it's insulated, it's a little bit quieter. You may have noticed this season as well that there's a bit of a lack of Carl in the videos, and there's a reason for that. Carl has been doing a lot of solo traveling and traveling with his wife this season, and because I'm back to work, I don't have as much time to do motorcycle trips with him and sort of coordinate our time to do videos. And the weekends that I'm available, well, my wife has me building the pergola out on our deck. So it's been a little bit of a slow year. Again, I apologize for the lack of content. But as the season goes on, hopefully Carl will be back in the videos. I know I gave him a GoPro to take along on his most recent trip out to Nova Scotia on his motorcycle. And hopefully when he gets back, he can share some of that with us if he's managed to figure out how to use the GoPro. So we'll see if that panned out or not. Again, let's talk a little bit about tips and how enjoyable tips are for me, because I've said this right from the start. I am not an expert. I learned through people showing me and giving me tips, and in turn sharing those tips with you. So when you include those tips in the comments section, I find them extremely useful. So why don't we take a look at the first tip that you've given me. Now I have to apologize. I need to use a little bit of paper here to keep all these tips straight. So this is tip number 1, and it comes from @TullyG493, and it came in about 8 months ago. And they said to remove tight Phillips head screws, use a battery-powered 1/4-inch impact driver with a screw tip. Now this is a great tip, and it's one that I've shared with you on the channel before, but I think it's worth mentioning. Now, they really are accurate in the fact that you need to use a quarter drive, not a half-inch drive full impact gun. And I find I've got both 18 and 12 volt tools in my shop. I like the 12 volt for working on motorcycles and snowmobiles because these are a little less aggressive maybe than the 18 volt stuff, especially Milwaukee. My Ryobi stuff is not nearly as strong as the Milwaukee, but use a good quality tip. If you can get JIS tips, absolutely use those. But I've said before, Milwaukee Phillips head tips really do seem to fit JIS fasteners really well. The nice thing about a 1/4 inch impact is you can push on it and then put a little bit of power. And you can slow the feed on those so it hits slower. And that tends to break those fasteners free. You have to obviously be careful with this tip because if you were just to go full bore and not be precise with the tool, there's a risk of either camming and stripping out the fastener head, or worse, snapping the head right off the fastener, leaving it stuck in that hole. So it is a good tip. It's something people should be aware of, but you want to sneak up on the fastener, not just 100% right off the bat. So that's a great tip, and that's tip number 1. All right, let's take a look at the next tip. And this tip comes from @arc001, and it came in about 2 months ago. Now, you may have seen me wash my motorcycle on this channel. In fact, I talked about it really early on, how to wash your motorcycle to keep water out of your bearings, pivots, joints, things like that, electrical components. But this viewer followed that up a couple months ago by saying, after you wash your bike, take it for a 5 to 10 minute ride to burn off, blow off, and spin off any water because it adds years to your bike. What a great tip. It's a simple tip, and it's one that anybody that actually owns a motorcycle can do without purchasing anything. And it gets you out on the road a little bit more often. Now, what I like about this tip is it's not just about cosmetics, getting the water spots off your bike. And let's face it, I don't really worry about that too much with my DR. It's not a trailer queen. And it's certainly, I don't care if it gets some natural pinstriping as you bring it down through the woods. But what this viewer pointed out is it adds years to your bike. The reason it does this is it reduces moisture on the motorcycle, helps to drive water away from bearing surfaces, and helps to reduce any kind of corrosion. That's a great tip. It's one that everybody should think about doing when they're out washing their bike. So let's take a look at tip number 3. Okay, tip number 3 comes to us from @Ridded69. And it really does talk about an issue that most DR650 riders are going to face at some point when they're doing service on their motorcycle. It dates back to a video that I made probably 2 years ago now on servicing a single-cylinder motorcycle, the DR650 in particular. When I took my airbox cover off, like many DR owners, the square captured nuts that sit in the airbox cover housing kept falling out, and they can be really challenging. You may lose them if you're out on the trail doing service work. Well, this viewer said that if your capshift nuts are loose, simply put a small dab of silicone sealer on it to keep it sitting fast. That's a great, simple little tip that's not very expensive and that you can do at home quite easily to keep those pesky nuts in the slots that they're supposed to be held into. What a great tip. It's simple. I really like it. And I'm going to do that on my bike right now. just going to leave that in the hole like that while we get on to the next tip. Tip number 4 comes to us from Thripster007. And it's in regards to the video series that I made on servicing and greasing the rear suspension on your DR650. In that video, I remember commenting on how I could not get a torque wrench underneath the motorcycle to tighten up the bell crank nut on the bottom of the suspension. The challenge here is I cannot get a socket to use my impact on this side. I managed to get a 17mm socket on the bolt head over here, and now it's kind of jammed in there. So I'm just going to take a spanner and lift this up. I'm going to put the spanner right on there. Now this again. So I just tightened it up to where I felt it was close to the specs. What Thripster says is to torque the bell crank bolt, remove the rear brake lever. The hole that the brake lever pivot goes into is large enough for a 3/8 extension bar and lines up perfectly with the nut. This is one of my favorite tips that I have received in a long, long time because it's practical, but it also shows some lateral thinking in there and looking at the big picture. As an amateur mechanic like myself, I am not a pro, I just tinker. I find, like many home mechanics, I tend not to want to take more off of a vehicle than I have to get to a fastener. And this leads to me struggling, trying to get the right wrench or the right tool in there, sometimes making a custom tool to get to that fastener, when all I needed to do was look at the big picture and say, if I took that off, that would give me the room that I need to get the job done. Sometimes looking at taking things apart looks like extra time or complexity, but in the end, by doing something as simple as taking the brake lever off, you have now allowed yourself to make a proper repair with the right torque, and you're confident that when you're out riding, everything's good. This is a super solid tip and one that I really wanted to share with you. So let's get on to the final tip that I have for today's series. The 5th and final tip has to deal with the air filter. So I'm going to pull this out, I'm going to get it up on the bench, and then we'll talk about it. Our 5th and final tip has to do with your air filter in your DR650 or any foam air filter like this that you might have, like a washable filter. Now mine is in, pretty rough shape. It almost looks like it might be the original. So I think I'm just going to replace this during this service. But when this viewer was watching my how to service your bike, I commented on how after you wash your filter with soap and water and rinse it with fresh water, it may take several hours either in the sun or on your workbench for your air filter to fully dry out. You really want to have all the water and moisture out of this before you re-oil it and install it into your motorcycle. And it can be time that, might be wasted in some respects. But listen to what John Russell 9080 had to say. A simple trick to dry your filter is to put it on the back side of a box fan, and the air being drawn in will hold the filter in place and dry it while you are doing something else. That is a great tip. Now, I don't have a box fan, but what I do have is a squirrel cage fan here, and it'll do the same thing. So let's just say that I've washed my air filter. Well, what you do is you turn your fan on, and then you simply go like this. The air is now being drawn through the filter, and I can feel that with my hand. This is a great, clever trick that not only allows you to do other things while it's drying, but in the end will provide a much superior product in the end with less moisture in the filter. This is probably my favorite tip out of the most recent tips that I've gotten, and is my top tip for today's video. Thank you so much, John Russell 9080. Clever tip. Well, I think the last time that I oiled my air filter, I put way more on there than I needed. My hands are super greasy right now. I really enjoy the tips that you send in. And these 5 tips are going to become part of my service moving forward on my DR650. And they're going to cross over onto other things like snowmobiling and even small engine repair. They're really solid tips in my opinion. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like, subscribe, and by all means, leave comments and new tips for me to take a look at. And let me know if you liked this video. If you did, I'll continue to compile some viewer tips, and in the future, we'll do another top 5 viewer tips for you to share and build the community. I really do like that a lot. So until next time, I'm going to get back out there. I still have to cut my front lawn, and then my wife and I need to go and do some shopping, as mundane as that is. I enjoyed our time today. I hope to see you soon, and until then, tinker easy. Bye for now.